appreciate the chance to spend some time in this debate, and I want to express my appreciation to the member from Sydney, Victoria, for sharing his time. That when we're become a Gideon's army here, Mr. Speaker, we have to share more, and we're happy to do so. And I'm delighted to be able to participate in this debate. I think the member from Ottawa Centre has and the minister have outlined some of the history of the conflict. I simply want to say a couple of things in addition to the comments that have been made by my friend from Sydney, Victoria. The first one is that we should not make the mistake of believing that military intervention on its own represents a diplomatic and comprehensive solution to the challenges that we're facing in the world. I think it's very important for Canadians to have the understanding and have the sense that while Canada deeply appreciates and respects the work that our military are doing in Afghanistan, as they're doing in Libya, and as they have done in many other conflicts, everyone, I think, has to also understand that the resolution of these conflicts will require more than simply a military effort. So that's the first principle that I think we need to observe. And I know that there are many times when it becomes perhaps a little easy to think that, well, if we send some planes over and drop some bombs, we're doing our bit for the mission. But I must say I was pleased to hear from the minister today reflect on the fact that Canada's role needs to expand well beyond that. And I also want to state to my colleague from Ottawa Centre that we're fully supportive of the amendments that he has proposed, and I hope very much that those amendments will be satisfactory to the government. Il faut comprendre des choses dans le monde aujourd'hui.
We have to understand the world in which we live today is unstable. It's a world where democracy doesn't exist for everyone, where human rights aren't necessarily respected in many regions of the globe. People live in terrible conditions sometimes, difficult conditions that are economically difficult, that are clearly politically unstable under repressive regimes, governments that don't respect human rights. This is the world in which we live in. As my colleague for Sydney, Victoria, said, there are significant progress that has been done in Eastern Europe, in Latin America. We've seen dramatic change in the past 50 years. Changes we are in favor. But at the same time, in Africa, in the Middle East, there are still enormous challenges, as well as in China. China is not a democracy, and yet represents a country with over 1 billion people.
What is this standard? How do we deal with the fact that the world is not fully democratic, that the world is not one that fully respects human rights? Do we simply take the case of national sovereignty and say we can never intervene in the affairs of another country? Or do we understand, which I think we have to do, that the entire evolution of international law has taken us to this point, where we have to say what goes on inside a country is just as important as what happens between countries. And the question is not so much anymore what are the rights of the state vis-a-vis other states. The question much more is what are the rights of citizens in countries who are being mistreated by their government. Today is a day, Mr. Speaker, when this afternoon, and I'm sure the minister will be there, we will be commemorating the Holocaust. And we will be reflecting on the fact that the world turned away from those who were being viciously discriminated against in Germany, and we waited for a long time. And then the interventions came in Poland, and then the interventions came in Russia, and then they came in all of Eastern Europe. And then we have 6 million killed because they were Jews. So after the Second World War, we began to realize that we had to develop some sense of the rights of the world community and the rights that people have as a result of the injustices that are being faced. And that's the way we have to understand what's happening in Libya. People say to me, well, why Libya? Why not Syria? How do we explain this intervention and not this one? The answers are not always simple. And in fact, the answers are not always clear. But we are, slowly but surely as a world, taking the human footsteps towards the point where we can say, we will not allow people to be brutalized by their own government. We will not simply sit back and do nothing. We will intervene. And yes, that intervention may have a military component, and people will be killed as a result of that intervention. And none of us should take pride in the fact that, or not take pride, but take joy in the fact that that's the consequences of what happens. But we also understand from everything we've learned in human history the consequences of appeasement, the consequences of not facing up to dictators, the consequences of letting people get away with impunity, with killing their own people. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move an amendment to the proposal that's been made by my colleague from Ottawa Centre. So, in fact, the amendment would be to the amendment, and I'm going to be proposing, seconded by my colleague from Wascana, that the amendment be further amended by inserting after the words political transition the following: that the Government of Canada engage with the Libyan National Council, LNC, based in Benghazi, as a legitimate political entity and representative of the Libyan people. That it provide the LNC with advice and assistance in governance, including women's rights, and further by inserting after the words alleged crimes the following: that it ensure that Canadian citizens, landed immigrants, or visitors to Canada are not subject to any threats or intimidation by representatives of the Gadhafi regime. I would add to that, Madam Speaker, that I fully support the amendments that have been proposed by the New Democratic Party. We had additional language, but we didn't want to be redundant in simply putting forward the same perspective. And I hope that these proposals will have the support of the government. They're entirely consistent with the comments which the Minister made today, and I hope that they will be accepted. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The sub-amendment is therefore in order, proposed by Mr. Ray, seconded by Mr. Goodale, that the amendment be further amended by inserting after the words political transition the following: that the Government of Canada engage with the Libyan National Council, LNC, based in Benghazi as a legitimate political entity and representative of the Libyan people, that it provide the LNC with advice and assistance in governance, including women's rights, and by inserting after the words alleged crimes the following: that it ensure that Canadian citizens, landed immigrants, and visitors to Canada are not subject to any threats or intimidation by representatives of the Gadhafi regime. Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Ottawa Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the intervention by the Leader of the Liberal Party, and want to congratulate him on his return to the House formally and, of course, of his position. Madam Speaker, there was a number of things that he said in his speech that are important to note. And, of course, the whole trajectory of what it means to ensure that civilians' rights are protected. And I just wanted to underline the point that he made, because there has been a lot of debate around why Libya and why not, almost to the point of fill in the blank, and particularly in the case of Syria. And I would ask my colleague, in terms of the issue of Syria, if he could please give us his comment on how it is consistent to ensure that we have a diplomatic solution, that we support the people of Libya, at a time when we're still having to deal with Syria, and that, some would say that there shouldn't be a continuation of our support in Libya because there is a need for support in Syria. And I would simply ask him for his comment on that, and perhaps what we could do in the case of the situation in Syria that has...
Order, please. Order, please. I must give the Honourable time equal time to answer. The Honourable Member for Toronto Centre.
Well, I appreciate the question. I wish I had a magic answer. I mean, I can remember asking slightly higher up in the food chain over there when I was asking questions about Sri Lanka, saying why weren't we intervening in Sri Lanka? And I can remember many government ministers saying, well, what do you want us to do? Send in troops? And we now have the United Nations Secretary General of the UN has now commissioned a panel to explain, to look into the possibility of war crimes in Sri Lanka. In the case of Syria, it is a deep and genuine tragedy that's taking place. Thousands of people have been killed, and yet the world community has not been able to rouse itself to deal effectively with the crisis. We've carried on some sanctions. We've carried on some efforts to restrict the activities of the Assad government, but we have not been able to find an effective solution. There are many countries at the UN, two in particular on the Security Council, who do not want intervention because they do not want the eyes of the world to be focusing on them. And they both have vetoes. And they have taken a very, I regard, reactionary position with respect to the obligations of the community to intervene when there are such clear examples of abuse of a population. I think we have...
Order, please. Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
This is more a comment, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the Leader of the Liberal Party for his speech and intervention on this issue. I appreciate his wise counsel. There's no doubt that military action will not solve the problem alone, but the problem will also not be solved without military action. I want to say to him and to my friend from Ottawa Centre that I think Canadians should be very pleased that all members of this place have approached this issue with the best interests of Canadian values in mind. It has not been a partisan one. It has been collaborative, and I think it's a good day for this Parliament. So just to congratulate the Leader of the Liberal Party for his speech.
The Honourable Member for Toronto Centre.
Just almost overcome by the good feeling there. But I am aware that it will never last, and I'm fully aware of what else might follow. But I just want to say this to the government. I hope they will understand that respect is a two-way street, and that if there's greater transparency in operations and a willingness to discuss issues and to go through them on a systematic basis, there's always a great deal of goodwill on this side. Our caucus looks forward to discussions of policy that are based on this approach, and the more we can do it this way, frankly, the better off we're all going to be. I want to express my appreciation to my friend, the Minister of Defence, who accommodated us in giving us some briefings and giving us further information. Deeply appreciate it. And I think the more we can get on like this, the better off we'll be. But question period's coming at 2 o'clock. We'll see how long it lasts.
Reprise.